Okay, I deleted it. So if you could
Okay.
start fresh.
Starting now again. Yep. I'll let you know when we're on. And if everyone can mute themselves, please. Okay. We are live. Okay. Let me just go back now to the Zoom. Okay. Learning all about the stuff. Okay. Beautiful. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Nice to have you all. We're excited to continue on in our lessons about the Tanya. We're going to start off with the bracha of the Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al divrei Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'nasan lanu es Torah. Baruch atah Adonai nesein haTorah. So we're going to just do, before we go on, I just want to quickly review a few points from last week and clarify something also that we spoke about. And then we're going to go on to the next part, which is still actually the introduction of the Tanya. Hopefully next week we're going to start chapter 1, Perek Aleph of the Tanya. But for today, we're still actually going to learn about the compiler's forward, like the introduction, the letter that the Alter Rebbe wrote to his disciples. And then afterwards, we will, hopefully next week, we'll get into the actual first chapter of the Tanya. So just a quick review from last week. We said that the Book of Tanya, which took 20 years for the Alter Rebbe to write, contains 5 sections. The first section, he gave 2 names to it. The first is Likutei Amarim, which means a compilation of works, of sayings. In his great humility, we learned that the Alter Rebbe didn't even call himself the author of the Book of the Tanya, but he said, I compiled all these teachings from many great sages. For example, like from the Baal Shem Tov, from the Arizal. So he credited his work to great sages and also to the works of the Zohar. Out of his great humility, he didn't even give himself the credit as an author, but said, oh, I just compiled it from other sages. That was the first name of the first section of the Tanya. The second name was Sefer Shel Beinonim, the book of the Beinonim. And this, a Beinoni, as we discussed last week, is the intermediary. We're going to use this word Beinoni a lot. So if you can just try to remember what that word means, the intermediary person. It's not the righteous person who is on top. It's not the wicked person who's the third level, but it's the intermediary person. It's a human being who has struggles, it's a regular person who has desires, who has regular struggles in life. But this Beinoni, he is able, though, through tremendous work, he is able to gain control and self-discipline over his thoughts and over his emotions, so that ultimately his actions are godly and his actions are good. He never ever lets the bad side win over the good side. He never ever gives into his desires, but it's not easy. It's a struggle every single time, every single day he has it. It's a constant battle between the two sides that are raging within his body. And he struggles to attain that level, but he does maintain it through a lot of hard work. That is the Beinoni. He's not yet the perfect person. He's a regular human being. He has that struggle, but with a lot of self-discipline, he's able to attain that level of having victory over the bad. And we said that the main book of the Tanya is based on the verse, Ki karov elecha hadavar me'od, that Moshe said to the Jewish people that Torah, this matter, Torah, is very close to each one of you. It's beficha, uvilvavcha la'asosa. He said it's close in your speech, in your mouth, uvilvavcha, in your heart, in your emotions, and in your thoughts, la'asoso, to do it. And here the Alter Rebbe is going to explain how this matter, how is Torah so close to us? Like we said last week, come on, like let's be realistic. Is it so easy to have Torah close to us, meaning is Torah so relevant in our lives? Is it so easy to keep Torah, to keep all the mitzvot? It's not. It's not. It's a constant battle for us, and it's not so relevant. Sometimes we find that maybe Torah, some aspects of Torah don't apply to the modern world. So how come it's easy? What does it mean, ki karov elecha? And this is what the Alter Rebbe is going to explain to us in Tanya. And the Alter Rebbe said, the way that it's close, that it's karov, there's two different ways to make Torah close to you. There's a long, short way, and there's a short, long way. And so I just want to clarify from last week, because we explained the two different ways, the two different paths, the long, short way and the short, long way, with the story of the boy giving directions to the sage, to get to Jerusalem. So I just want to make it clear, the Alter Rebbe is actually going to teach us both ways, the long, short way and the short, long way. And he tells us that we're going to travel both paths. We're going to travel the long, short way and the short, long way. And what the Alter Rebbe explains, the difference between the two. He says that the long, short way is a much harder process. We also explained this last week. It's a more arduous process because we are creating a love for Hashem through our intellect. It's an intellectual generated love of Hashem. And because we are creating this love of Hashem, it's through our own effort, it's way more valued because it came from our effort. Hashem values effort. Effort is a very big component when performing mitzvot and learning Torah. Effort is humongous. So because we are putting in the effort of creating this love of Hashem, it's through contemplating and thinking about Hashem, and the Alter Rebbe is going to go on to teach us how to do it. As I said, it's an intellectual generated love of Hashem. It's way more valuable, and it's a longer way. But it's short because once we come to that level, we maintain it. Whereas the short, long level, which the Alter Rebbe is also going to discuss in many chapters later, it's short because this love and fear of Hashem that is going to be formed, it's not going to need any hard work. It's not going to have to be created from ourselves because it's a natural love and fear that it is already found within each one of us. It's a level of our soul. It's a very high level of our soul. Our soul is divided into 5 levels, and it's connected with the highest level of our soul. It's called Ahava Mesuteres. It's a hidden love. Every one of us is born with it. Every single Jew has this hidden, innate love of Hashem inside of him. And therefore, the short, long way refers to a person who just has to uncover and reveal that love of Hashem within him. So it's because it's a love of Hashem that Hashem put within us. Hashem implanted that love of Hashem within us. So when we access it, we have the strength of Hashem's love inside of us. And it's a greater love than the other love that we create on our own. This love of Hashem that Hashem implanted within each one of us is a way greater love than compared to what we can create. But the love that we create is way more valued, way more valued. So here, the Alter Rebbe is going to say that he is going to focus on the long, short way. That is the way of Chabad Chassidut, of the way of the Chabad philosophy. And as we're going to explain later on, the word Chabad, which is spelled Ches, Beis, Dalid, stands for the 3 intellectual capacities of a human being. The Chet is Chochmah, which means wisdom. That's the first level of our intellect. It's a spark of an idea. You get an idea in your head. It's not yet expanded. So that's Chochmah. And then we have Binah, which is understanding. That's a second level. You start to delve more deeply into that matter, and you start to understand it more. That's Binah for the bet. And the third letter, Dalet, is Da'at, which is comprehension, internalization, When you take that concept and it doesn't just remain an idea, but you internalize and it becomes part of you. You comprehend it to the point where you actualize it in your actions. And that's what Chabad stands for, Chachma Bina Da'at, that we are an intellectual philosophy. It's not just accessing a love of Hashem just by feeling it, but we are delving into the greatness of Hashem using our own intellect and trying to and aspiring to connect to Hashem first on an intellectual level. So that road of Chabad Chassidut, there's a lot of self-work. It's a road of inner growth, focusing on our minds, focusing on mastering our thoughts, filling our minds with godly thoughts. And through this, once we fill our minds with godly thoughts and with the greatness of who Hashem is, then we can have mastery over our emotional world. And then we can bring a harmony between our emotional world and our intellectual world. And when we come to this level of synthesizing our emotions with our thoughts, and we have this deep level of loving Hashem and fearing Hashem, then the natural outcome is to give our hearts to Hashem, our actions to Hashem, our speech to Hashem, because once we have given our heart to Hashem, once we have, starting off with the emotions, intellect, once we have deeply connected on an intellectual level about who Hashem is, and it has come down to our emotions, we feel it in such a strong way, we have such an intense love and fear of Hashem, and we've given over our heart to Hashem, then ultimately our actions, our deeds will also be given over to Hashem. And that is the goal of the Tanya. So that's, in short, again, what we did last week. After that Sharblat, after that title page that we just discussed, in the Tanya, the next few pages are two letters of approbation. It's a Jewish injunction by our sages that when a holy book has been written, it should have letters from other sages confirming that this is truly a holy book. So in the Book of Tanya, there are two letters from another two sages, one by the name of Rabbi Yehuda Leib HaKohen, and another great sage, Rabbi Zusha Me Anipoli, Rabbi Zusha, who lived from the city of Anipoli. They were actually both from Anipoli, but Rabbi Zusha was known as Rabbi Zusha Me Anipoli. And these two great sages gave letters of approbation for the book of the Tanya. And the story goes that they both received this holy book on the same night. And they both sat up the whole night and studied this Book of Tanya. They read through the whole thing, the whole Book of Tanya. And they were so excited with this new, beautiful, revelation of all the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov and bringing it down into such a clear, comprehensive way that they both ran in the early mornings. They each lived on the other side of town, and they both ran to each other. They wanted to bring this beautiful book to each other, and they both met on the bridge in the middle of town. And when they saw each other, they were so excited, and they hugged each other, and they danced, and they embraced, because there was this enormous joy. They were so happy with what the Alter Rebbe had done in this book. And as another great rabbi, whose name is Reb Levi Yitzchak from the city of Berdichev, he commented and said, how did the Alter Rebbe put such an enormous God into such a small book? He was able to encapsulate the essence of God and how us human beings can connect on an essential level to God. How can the Alter Rebbe explain this and the enormity of God in such a small book? And so they both these great sages, Rabbi Yehuda Leib HaKohen and Rabbi Zusha Me Anipoli, they basically wrote in their letters of approbation about the enormous powers of the Tanya. Now, we said that there's 5 sections of the Tanya. The first 3 were written during the Alter Rebbe's life. And the last 2 sections were actually written after the, were not written, but they were put in, they were added to the Book of the Tanya after the Alter Rebbe passed away. And those 2 last sections contained, the second to last section contained letters that the Alter Rebbe had written throughout his life to his disciples. And the 5th section contains essays and explanations based on the first section of the Tanya. And these 2 last sections were added by the Alter Rebbe's sons. And one, forgot to mention one last thing, that the Rebbe Yehuda Leib HaKohen, who gave the approbation for the Book of the Tanya, one of the things that he wrote that I thought were really nice, he made reference to the fact that Tanya Ketores Neshama Veruach, which means Tanya is like a spice, an incense. Ketores means an incense. Like in the temple, one of the sacrifices that were brought was the sacrifice of incense, beautiful, nice smelling, aromatic sacrifice. So Rabbi Yehuda Leib says that Tanya is like a spice, an incense for the soul. Just as when somebody is faint and weak, you give spices and nice smelling stuff to revive them, so too the Tanya is given to revive the soul of the Jewish people. And then we go on, after these 2 letters of approbation, in the Tanya, we go on to read a letter that the Alter Rebbe himself, the author of the Tanya, writes to his disciples. Like, you know, before he writes his big book, he himself writes a letter to his disciples, to his Hasidim. Hasidim are disciples. Why is he writing this letter, and what is this letter saying? What is the purpose of this letter? So basically what happened was that as the Tanya was going to print, as I said, it took 20 years for the Alter Rebbe to compile, to write the Book of the Tanya. And it was handwritten. Copies of the Tanya were being handwritten, and if you want to say like passed on to from one disciple to another. And being that it was handwritten, there was a lot of chances for errors, even, you know, mistakes to, it was easy for mistakes to be written, you know, as it was being copied, to happen in the book. Maybe handwriting couldn't be read properly, you know, illegible or whatever it was. But the basic mistakes that happen when something is handwritten, it was happening, and the Alter Rebbe didn't want that to happen. And so the Alter Rebbe wanted to print the Tanya. And basically another reason why the Alter Rebbe wanted the Tanya to be written, as the Alter Rebbe writes here in the letter, he says, is because there were so many people coming to see the Alter Rebbe and talk to the Alter Rebbe and pour their hearts out to the Alter Rebbe about their struggles, whether it's in their connection with Hashem and serving Hashem or just daily struggles. And the Alter Rebbe said that he couldn't handle anymore the masses of people coming to him. He just didn't have time, and he didn't have the energy to talk with everyone and answer everybody's questions. And he said that everybody also, you know, it's easy for people to forget what he told them, the advice that he had given them, and they would come back to him and ask the same questions. So the Alter Rebbe said that he wanted that this book of the Tanya will take the place of private audiences that he had with his disciples. So instead of his disciples having to come with him and talk to him on a personal level, they could just open up the Book of the Tanya, and the Book of the Tanya will have all the answers that they need. Whatever advice the Alter Rebbe would give to them, they could find in the Book of the Tanya. So when his disciples heard that a book was going to be printed, and that would take the place of them going to talk to their Rebbe personally, to have private audience, to have a private mentor, like one-on-one with their great leader, they were devastated. He said, no ways, we don't want this book to be printed. We want a personal connection with our Rebbe. We want to go talk like mouth to mouth. We don't want to read about it in a book. We don't want to be mentored by a book. So they were really scared, and they were very upset about it. So in this letter, so the Alter Rebbe wrote a letter to his disciples addressing their fears and explaining to them why he felt the book was necessary. And the letter has two sections. So the first letter just basically, the first section of the letter basically just has greetings and blessings to his disciples, to his Hasidim. The second section of the letter, the Alter Rebbe reinforces and agrees with his disciples' fears. And he says, you're right. I understand you. I understand how you feel, that how can one book address the fears, the emotions, the dilemmas, all the struggles of each one of you. Every person is so different. Each one of you have different feelings, different hearts, different minds. I mean, no two person is alike. He says, I understand that you want to hear Musar. Musar is like rebuke. And Musar is instructions on how to better oneself, on how to gain a deeper connection with Hashem. So when one hears criticism, if you want to say constructive criticism, the Alter Rebbe says, I understand that you want to hear it instead of reading about it, right? It's much different when a person, when a person is giving over constructive criticism, and the presence of the person, the way that the person looks at you in the eyes, the way that the person listens to you will make such a great impact on the person receiving the criticism, right? You can't compare the human presence of another person. Just that alone is connecting and is able to help you. So how can you compare that? The Alter Rebbe is saying, I understand that you can't compare that type of human connection to just reading about it in a book. And the Alter Rebbe also says that I understand that the human mind of every person is so different that when one person reads a book, he will gain and extrapolate ideas and messages very differently than another person. Two people can read the same book, the same message, like the same instructions or whatever it is. And you can both come away with a different message, like both of you will take away something else, right? That's number one, that our minds and intellects are so different. And number two, the situation in which a person finds themselves in at that moment in their life. It could be that a person is going through a very dark moment in their life. They're having so much struggles. They've had enough of all their challenges in life. And so if a person is reading a book, let's say the Book of Tanya, which is talking about how to improve one's life and struggles and how to connect with Hashem, even if the Book of Tanya has so much goodness, has so much light, has so much godliness in it, but if a person is in a dark place, he is not going to be able to receive any of it. He's not going to be an open vessel to be able to and open his heart to be able to take in all these holy words. He's not, because he's in a dark place at that moment. So also depending on the situation and the condition of that person, the emotional condition of that person at that moment while he's reading the Tanya, he might not be able to grasp and internalize everything that the Tanya is saying. It's like, for example, even if you would read a book that is so inspirational to you, you love it, and you give it to your friend, you say, I read this amazing book, I want you to read it. And the friend reads it and she says, yeah, whatever, it was nice. And you say, what do you mean it was nice? It was amazing. Didn't you find it so inspirational? Maybe she didn't, because she is on a different mindset than you at that moment in her life. Or maybe even not, just she doesn't find it. It doesn't touch her heart. Each one of us are so different. There's actually, and the Alter Rebbe brings, so as we see, he is confirming, he's agreeing with his disciples. And he goes further to say that there's actually a blessing that one recites when one is among 600,000 Jews. May it be speedily when Mashiach comes, we'll all be reunited in Israel together with more than 600,000 Jews. But there's a special blessing that you say when you find yourself together with such a multitude of Jews. What is that blessing? We bless Hashem as the wise one of the secret. The wise one of the secret. What is the secret? Every Jew is a secret. because every Jew is a unique identity. No Jew is the same. Each one of us is our own secret. Hashem is the wise one of every secret. When Joshua, the one who took over the leadership of the Jewish people after Moses, after Moshe Rabbeinu, he led the Jewish people into the land of Israel, what was he praised for? He was praised for that he was able to relate to every single person, according to each one's spirit, according to each one's mind. And that is very hard. That is truly difficult. But that is the sign of the ultimate leader, somebody who could answer the question according to that person, not according to the question, but according to the person who asked the question. So the Alter Rebbe here, again, is proving that every single Jew is a secret, is so different. And so he says, I understand you. And then the Alter Rebbe goes on to say in his letter, he says, the Book of Tanya is also, it's so different than, let's say, a book of the Talmud or the Mishnah, where it's a book that contains the word of Hashem. Let's take the book of Halakha, of where it states the laws of the Torah, right? All the halachic laws. So even if you look at the book of Halakha, where it's so concrete, it's so black and white, right? Is it this law or that law? And even so, in such a book of Hashem, where the word of Hashem is, even there's debates between rabbis. Even there you have machloket, which is discussions and debates, and there's arguments of what is permissible, what is not permissible. And we have very different outcomes of the law. Like we have Beit Shammai and we have Beit Hillel, which is two schools of thought. Beit Shammai, let's say, will say this is permissible, and Beit Hillel will say, no, it's not permissible, or just two different ways of doing things. We have so many different outcomes of laws within Talmud, which, as I said, it's like so concrete. It's more tangible stuff. It's not like the Book of Tanya, which is dealing with emotions. We're talking about concrete laws. And even in such a book of the Halakha, so concrete, even there's different discussions, there's different minds, different ways of discussing, of relaying what is the outcome, what is the law, and why is that? How can it be, the Alter Rebbe says, that some will say it is permissible, some will say it's not permissible? Why is there so much discussion in the book of the Talmud? It's because of the soul orientation of the rabbis. And it basically connects with us also, that each of our souls come from a different source. Where the source is based, that's how we are going to understand halakha. And that's how the rabbis understood halakha. What does it mean? What does it mean that where our souls are based, or what's the source, where our souls are sourced from? If a person's soul comes from the level of chesed, which means kindness. Every soul, as we discussed many before in our classes of Tanya, every soul comprises 7 emotions: kindness, severity, beauty, compassion. But every soul has way more of one of those attributes. So if someone's soul is coming from the level of chesed, is like more strongly connected with the level of chesed, which is kindness and compassion and generosity, that means that that person innately will be more loving and kind and warm. For example, you see some people who are very generous with money, very giving with money, and they're so much more loving and friendly. It's because their soul is rooted in chesed. And you see other people who are very strict, very like black and white, very like in the box type of people, or they're very tight with their money. It's because their soul came from the level of gevurah, which is severity. Now, doesn't mean one is better than the other. They're both good. They're both correct. It's just different. And so the same thing with our sages in the book of the Talmud. If one sage, his soul was rooted more in chesed, which is kindness, that means that he's going to work very deeply to find a way where this matter of the Jewish law is permissible. And where a sage's soul is rooted more in gevura, in severity, it means that he will judge more strictly. And he will say, no, it's not permissible. And they're both correct. It's not that one is correct and one is not. They're both elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. These and these are the words of God. The words of our sages are like the words of God. They're both correct. It's just a matter of which one we follow. And it's just, the reason is because their souls are rooted in those aspects of either kindness or severity. So what the Alter Rebbe is saying here is, if this is true within the realm of concrete halacha, that even there's different minds, and there's different minds and different messages that we take away from those halachot, from those laws, then can you imagine a book of the Tanya? It's a book where we're trying to pull out from you a love and fear of Hashem, and we're so different. For every single mitzvah that we do, we have to have a love and fear of Hashem, because love and fear are called the wings. Just as wings help one soar up high, so too the love and fear, which are wings, help our mitzvot soar up to heaven. It brings our mitzvot up to Hashem. So can you imagine that my love of Hashem is very different to your love of Hashem? My fear of Hashem is very different to your fear of Hashem. And when we talk about fear, we're not talking about a fear where we're scared, where we're shivering, where we're shaking from Hashem. We're like so scared of him. We're not talking about that fear. And we're going to learn about it in the Tanya. There's two levels of fear. The low level of fear, the immature level of fear, if you want to say, is one where, oh, I'm so scared of Hashem. Like, wow, he's like a giant. He's so fearful. He's so scared. He's going to judge us. But the higher level of fear that we're talking about, the truest level of fear, is a level of awe, where we're awed by Hashem's grandeur, when we're in awe of Hashem's mightiness. Wow, Hashem created this whole world. Wow, you're in amazement. It's like when you go see a real king, when you see majesty, when you see royalty, you're in awe of him. Your amazement and respect, correct? You have so much respect. You're in amazement of this grand person. You would never want to do anything wrong in his eyes. You would never want to sin. You're just in such awe of him. That's the fear and awe that we talk about Hashem. So as I said, my love of Hashem is very different to your love of Hashem. My Hashem is different to yours. Each one's Hashem is different. I relate to Hashem on a different level than you do. I connect to Hashem on a different level. Some people feel more connected through prayer. Some people feel connected to Hashem just by sitting outside in nature, and they feel their love of Hashem. Every person's connection with Hashem is different, because each of us is a secret. And so the Alter Rebbe says, yes, I understand. How can it be that a book of Tanya, where we are trying to extrapolate the love and fear of Hashem out of each person, how can it be that one book can answer everybody's question? That me and you can open up the same book of the Tanya, read it, and have an answer for each one of us. How can that be? It's impossible. Because we're talking about emotions here, not just like dry, concrete laws. We're talking about emotions, feelings, struggles. So how is it? So the Alter Rebbe, as we see, he's agreeing with all his disciples. He says, I agree with you. I understand you. But, here comes the but. The Alter Rebbe says, the reason why I could tell you that the book of Tanya can answer every single one of you, and that it will be relevant for all generations. This book of Tanya was written over 200 years ago. And it's still relevant more than ever now, in this day and age today, when we have internet issues, in this modern day world, with all the iPhones and all the eyes and this generation of we want everything now, instant, right? Tanya is so relevant nowadays. How can that be? Because the Alter Rebbe says that I know each one of you so well. I've spoken to each one of you over so many years, and I've answered you so many times, that I could write a book that will reach each one of you. And in this book, every single one of you will find the answers to all of your questions. You will find inner peace, the correct way for your own personal path in the service of Hashem. So the same voice that is saying, yes, it seems impossible that this one book can answer all of you, is the same voice that is saying so strongly, yes, this book does it. And it therefore heightens to a tremendous degree this book that we are about to learn. If the same person can say, I understand you, but at the same time, I promise you that this is the self-guide help book for life for each one of you. And he says, so just to understand, well, what does it mean that the Alter Rebbe said, like, I know each one of you so well that I'm telling you that this book can answer each one of your dilemmas? It's saying because the way that the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya, the way that he put godliness in the Book of the Tanya, is that when we learn the Tanya, we form such a deep connection with Hashem that out of ourselves, let me go back a second, that when we learn the Tanya, we rise above our own blockages. When we come to understand the greatness of Hashem and who Hashem is and how we're so innately connected with Hashem, that we each have a soul, and we're able to rise above our boxes, our limitations, our challenges. And then we form this connection with Hashem that automatically we are able to answer our questions ourselves. So it's not that the Alter Rebbe is going to answer every single specific dilemma, word for word in the Book of the Tanya. It's that he gives us the tool that we can answer our questions ourselves, that everything becomes clear. There's so many stories that I've heard from so many people who teach Tanya, that by teaching Tanya, just by learning the Tanya, when they give classes, the audiences or the people who are learning it on their own, they say, wow, I want to try to keep Shabbos a little more. I want to start, being more careful in the mitzvah of tzedakah, or I want to be more careful in the mitzvah of kosher, just on their own, because the way that the Alter Rebbe put the godliness, Elokus, Hashem, into the Tanya, it's a way that we can connect with it on such an internal level that we ourselves are able to answer our questions on our own. And the Alter Rebbe goes on to encourage those people, sages, rabbis, who do understand Tanya and are able to teach Tanya, to not have false humility, and that they should go and teach Tanya to others and help others understand themselves through Tanya and gain a better understanding of who their souls are. And they shouldn't say, oh, no, I can't, I don't know enough. The Alter Rebbe instructed them, if you know how to learn Tanya, go and help others. And at the same time, whoever doesn't know how to learn the Book of the Tanya should go and seek a mentor or rabbi or a friend or somebody who does know Tanya. So it's like a two-way street. One has to help the other person. Whoever needs help should go and seek help. And the Alter Rebbe continues in his letter, and he says he was very hesitant to print the Tanya for years. He didn't want to do it at first, for many years. Why? Because it's such a godly book. There's so much godliness in it. And by printing it in a book, it will bring it down to such a physical level and reality. It's like putting Hashem into a book, putting Hashem into something so physical, like printing a book, that it's not handwritten, it's printed. And at the same time, the Alter Rebbe was also hesitant because it will allow for mistakes to get into the book. Because as I said before, it was first hand copied from one copy to another. So mistakes could creep in while it's being hand copied. And not only just mistakes, but also deliberate mistakes. Why? because at that time of the printing of the Tanya, there was great opposition by the opposing group of Hasidim. They were called Misnagdim. Those who were against this philosophy of Hasidut, totally against the Alter Rebbe revealing this Hasidut and bringing it down to the level of every single person. They were totally against it, vehemently against the Alter Rebbe. And so what they did, what these Misnagdim did, was that they intentionally distorted the words of the Tanya. And they used it as a means to prove the falseness of the Alter Rebbe's approach. They wanted to disprove the Alter Rebbe, all that he was saying so much that like they would intentionally write write deliberate mistakes in the Tanya. And that's what the Alter Rebbe was afraid of. So with no choice, after many years, the Alter Rebbe agreed to print it, which was of course to the benefit of so many of us. And the Alter Rebbe, in his letter, he gives a huge thanks and appreciation to all those that helped print the Tanya. They literally had self-sacrifice to print the Tanya because there were so many hardships, like obstacles from the government. They were in Tsarist Russia, and of course, Tsarist Russia didn't want them to print holy books. So obviously there were so many, it took so much longer because of all these obstacles from the government. And he thanked all the people who gave their financial help. And he gives them tremendous blessings. I'm sorry.
What year was it, honey?
I'm sorry?
What year was it? The Tanya was?
It was in around 1760s.
Thank you.
It was around the 1760s, if I'm not mistaken, the 1700s for sure. Yeah, because the Alter Rebbe was born in 1745, and I'm sorry, the Alter Rebbe, it was published in 1796. I'm sorry, 1796. So the Alter Rebbe gives tremendous blessings to those who helped him publish the Tanya. And at the same time, he also vehemently gives tremendous warning to those who think that they can reprint the Tanya without permission and make copies that would give extra opportunity to distort the Alter Rebbe's approach to insert a few deliberate errors and make many more copies. He really gave huge warnings about this, that nobody except for the original printer could print additional copies of the Tanya. The Tanya went to print a few times, many times. You know, first they copied, I don't know, there was thousands of, I think it was like 5,000 prints of the Tanya first. And then the second time it was printed, it was like 20,000 copies. Each time there were more and more copies. So the Alter Rebbe really gave great warnings to anyone who thought that they can just copy the Tanya on their own and then maybe write in things on their own. And he also gives curses to those who would do so. And he gives a 5-year ban to print the Tanya from the time of the first printing, except for the original printers. Only the original printers can print again. And the 5-year ban was re-extended each time the Tanya was reprinted. So that's how the Alter Rebbe ends off his letter, with blessings thanking those who helped him print the Tanya, and with warnings to those who think that they can reprint the Tanya on their own. And he ends off by the words, he says, these are the words of the Melakhet. Melakhet meaning the compiler, not the author, but the compiler, as we said before. And the writing of this book of the Tanya it wasn't just the beginning of the promise of the Geula, of the redemption. It was like the revealed aspect that like Mashiach is coming, because the Baal Shem Tov, who we said he was the founder of Hasidut, right? He was the founder of these writings. And the Baal Shem Tov, whose name was Yisrael, his soul had an elevation. His soul went up to the realms on high. Many times the stories of great sages who their soul had a out-of-body experience, if you want to say. and his soul went up to Shemayim, to the upper heavens. And his soul cried out and said, Mosai Kosimar, when is like the end of the Golus? When are you going to be revealed? When is the redemption going to come? At that time, the Jews were suffering tremendously from pogroms, from their enemies. It was a very hard time. And so the Baal Shem Tov asked, when is it all going to end? And the answer that he got was, L'chsheyafutzu mainosecha chutza. When your well springs will spread out, chutza, to the most furthest realms of the world, of this physical world, when your teachings will be spread out and they'll flow out to the outside world, to every corner of the world, and it will be accessible to every single Jew to learn your teachings, that is when Mashiach will come. So now, being that the Tanya was being published and it was made accessible to the human mind to be able to comprehend this vast godliness of Hashem, this was like a tremendous turnaround. This was a tremendous innovation. And this was a sign of that promise of L'chsheyafutzu mainosecha chutza. This was the beginning of spreading the well springs of Hasidut to all corners of the world. And as I've said many times, nowadays, we see it even more, like we're more than ready for Mashiach to come, because that promise is so evident now more than any other time. Torah learning is so accessible in every single language on the internet. No one can have any excuse that they can't learn. You can go on the internet, you can call somebody. There's organizations that partner up people on the phone to learn together. Wherever you find yourself in the world, you can find anything on Torah. So this is a sign that Mashiach is imminent. Mashiach is standing right by the door and he's ready to come. So the Tanya was the beginning of this revelation of spreading the well springs of Hasidus to the outside world. We're going to stop here because next week we'll start chapter 1. And as I said, if any of you want to have the book, the actual book of the Tanya, it's beautiful to have the book that you can read inside, to look inside, you can let me know. You can purchase the book of the Tanya, or I will have it on the screen online and you can all read it as well from the screen. I'll share my screen. So you will let me know. And please God, next week we will start learning the actual book of the Tanya. So just to end off, I want to end off with a blessing that each one of us should realize our tremendous potential, that we're not just regular human beings, regular individuals. We are each divine people. We each have a soul within us. As we said, we have the godly soul and the Nefesh Elokit, the godly soul, and the Nefesh Bahamut, and we have the animalistic soul. But more than ever, we have a godly soul within us that is so strong. And when we, so therefore it gives us such a tremendous power that when we define ourselves, we're not defined as who we are by our moods or even our intellect, or even, I don't know, who we are, what our occupation is. We are, when you say, who are you? We are divine people. We are godly people. And because we are godly, we have such tremendous powers. And we should never, ever underestimate our godly powers, our godly potential. So may this week bring great blessings to each one of you. May you be able to uncover your godly potential in the greatest way possible and bring about only goodness for you and your family. Wishing you all a great week. If anyone has any questions,